I just got done with the math exam in the 11th grade, and I came out of the auditorium, and there are these groups of students who are huddled together and discussing the answers. Remember that? And I'm trying to sneak into one group to understand whether I stand a chance to get through or not. And they were discussing some question 4, and so I quickly looked at the question paper, went to my question 4, and they were discussing, hey, what was your answer? My answer was 15%. The other guy said, oh, my answer was 16%. The third guy said, oh, my answer is 17%. And I'm not saying anything because my answer is 2,200 kilometers. And so I spent a vast part of my life believing and knowing that I am not smart enough, because I knew in class when I am not able to follow and there are these people who are asking questions to the faculty, and I'm sitting there and wondering what's going on. And that's a question that I kept thinking all the while is, do I need to be smart enough to succeed? And I think that's a question that each one of us must have asked sometimes to ourselves in our lives, that all of these geniuses around me, and am I smart enough to succeed? In the last few years that I have been working and partnering with people to help them be successful, I have been asked this question multiple times. And so through my study and reading, I came across a lot of material, but there are 3 studies that really impacted my understanding of whether we need to be smart enough to succeed or not. So this first study is by K. Eric Anderson, the author of Peak, wherein there's this group of researchers that goes into the Berlin School of Art, which is in Berlin. And they go to the violin class. Now, for all those who play musical instruments here, I have a lot of respect for you, because I have tried learning the guitar twice, and all I can play is Happy Birthday with a lot of practice. So I know playing an instrument is not easy. And plus the violin is, I believe, a more difficult musical instrument, because they're holding the violin there and they have this bow which they're waving around the instrument, and if they wave it well, it's music. If not, it's like the screechy brakes from a rickety car. So they went to this class, these researchers went to this class, the violin class in the Berlin School of Arts, to understand this, that whether people who play the violin well, are they prodigies? Are they geniuses? Do they have music in their blood? Or is it that whoever practiced more became better? And so they went into the Berlin School of Arts, the violin class, and they asked the teacher, can you give us 10 students who are the best, like the legends in the class? And the teacher said, all right, here are 10 students who are the best in the class. He said, okay, so this is one group. Let me name this group for our understanding, legends. Okay, so first group. And they went back again and they said, can you give us 10 more students in the class who are definitely not legend level, but up there, good students? So let's say, all right, here's 10 more students who are good at playing the violin. And they said, give us one final group who are students who are average in the class, definitely not legends, not even good, average in the class. And so they had this third group called average. Now the researchers went to each of this group to understand that by the time they became 18 years of age, what is the total amount of hours of practice had they done. So first they went to the average group, figured out how many hours of practice they had done by the time they became 18 years of age, and on an average it was I'm just rounding off the numbers a little bit, 3,400 hours of practice. So on an average, a person in the average group had done 3,400 hours of practice by the time they became 18 years of age. Then they went to the good group and conducted the same survey, and they figured out that the good group had done roughly 5,300 hours of practice by the time they became 18 years of age. And then they went to the legend group and asked them how many hours of practice have they done by the time of 18 years of age, and they realized they had done 7,300 hours of practice by the time they became 18 years of age. Now, as you observe, it is clear from this experiment that the more they practiced, the better they got. And so the fact that some people are born in a certain way to some extent stands defeated. But what I also understood from this experiment was a lot of people ask me, what do I do on a day-to-day level to differentiate myself from being average to being extraordinary? And so let me bring these two categories here, the good category and the legendary category. Good category had done about 5,400 hours of practice by the time they were 18 years of age. The legends did 7,300 hours of practice by the time they were 18 years of age. So if I compare the hours difference, it is roughly 2,000 hours. I'm making rough calculations here, back of the envelope kinds. So roughly 2,000 hours of difference between people who are good and people who are legendary, between people who will be forgotten after music school most probably, or might play in pubs and bars, and with people who are legends, who will be international solo artists and will be remembered for generations. The difference between these two sets of people was 2,000 hours, but that 2,000 hours wasn't in 1 year or 5 years, it was over 18 years. And so if we do simple mathematics of 2,000 divided by 18 years and I boil it down to the level of minutes in a day, the difference between the good and the legend group is 30 minutes in 1 day. So 30 minutes in 1 day, the good group practiced less, they will be forgotten after music school. And 30 minutes more, the legend group practiced, and they will be remembered for generations. So this experiment taught us two things. Number one, that there's nothing like a prodigy or a genius as far as possible. And the two is that on a daily basis, if we are able to push ourselves for 15 or 30 minutes in that craft in which we want mastery, then through years, that is the level of difference that it creates. The second experiment was conducted by Dr. McGuire, and this was conducted over a series of years on taxi drivers in London. Now, if you want to be a taxi driver in London, think twice or thrice, because it's not that easy. If you think, but I love to drive my car and I have a driving license, you've not even begun. So if you want to become a licensed black taxi driver in London, you need to pass what is called the knowledge test. Now in the knowledge test, there is this Charing Cross station in London. The prospective driver licensees need to know every street, nook and corner within a 6-mile radius of the Charing Cross station. There are 25,000 streets in the 6-mile radius of the Charing Cross station. And the prospective drivers need to know all of these streets by heart, and not just the streets, the movie theaters, the restaurants, the points of interest, basically anywhere that the customer might sit in the cab and say, here is where I want to go. They need to know this in their head. And so knowledge boys or knowledge girls, as they're called, spend years going around the streets of London, noting things down and trying to memorize the whole map in their head, so that when they go for that knowledge test and the panel asks them, how do I get from point A to point B? If street C is not working and disruption on street D, then exactly which route do I need to take? They need to know that route by heart. And so there was this study that was conducted by Dr. McGuire on the brains of these taxi drivers and how they compared to brains of, say, normal people or people who hadn't taken the knowledge test yet. And in the scans, it was noticed that a particular part of the brains of these taxi drivers was swelled, was larger. That part of your brain is called the posterior hippocampi. Now, the posterior hippocampi is the part of your brain which is responsible for spatial memory. So if you know the way out of here to your houses, you know where is the left, where is the right, you just have it in your head somewhere. Or if you kept your wallet at a certain place in your house, if you hung your keys somewhere, you know where you've kept it. That is spatial memory. So in the drivers who had passed the knowledge test or who had been preparing for it, that part of the brain, which was the posterior hippocampi, was enlarged. It was sort of swollen, it was larger. And as compared to bus drivers in London, they had a normal sized posterior hippocampi, which shows that because bus drivers normally take a single route every day. But it was these taxi drivers who had to continuously learn new routes, and that is why that is the part of the brain that they kept activating every single day as they were preparing, and that part of the brain actually swelled. This actually draws a parallel between, let's say, a bodybuilder who is working day in, day out to build his muscle, and you can see that muscle grow after a while as he's getting stronger. Similarly, that part of the brain is not growing muscle, but brain tissue, but is growing. And so this fact that we have that our brain has stopped growing after the age of 18 might need to be reconsidered, because as we are focusing on parts of our brain, that part of the brain is actually growing. And hence, people might not be born with great memories. Perhaps it is also something that can be developed with consistent practice. The third experiment was done by 3 British researchers, where they recruited 57 children, kids young, for playing chess. Now, chess, as everybody relates to, is a game which requires certain level of intellect. And the goal of this experiment now was to find a correlation between IQ and expertise. So IQ, intelligence quotient, as you would know, is a measure of natural intelligence, or how fast will I learn or grasp something if I'm presented. And expertise is something which is entirely different. So they put and taught chess to these children, and these children started playing chess regularly. Now, out of these 57, 23, the top 23 chess players were selected, and their performance was mapped across tournaments to see how they are doing. And amongst these 23, when their IQ tests were conducted, the people in the top had a lower IQ than the people in the bottom. So it was the highest IQ people that were not able to top the rankings as far as chess was concerned, a game that is said to be related to intelligence. So what did this experiment prove? It showed that natural intelligence, or IQ, is a measure of how fast you learn new things. So if I'm teaching something new to everybody here, the people who will have higher IQ will grasp that thing faster. And obviously they have an advantage as compared to some people who might not have an IQ as high as them. However, as far as expertise is concerned, it has little to do with how fast you've learned something initially. But how is it that the high IQ people still rank lesser than the medium IQ people? Is because we medium IQ people have one advantage, is that we're able to stick to one thing for longer. So people who are a high IQ, because they can learn things faster, because their brain processes things faster, they are more easily distracted, and they will be trying to do more things at the same time, whereas people who are medium IQ will try to stick to one thing and develop that as far as that is concerned. And so intelligence, or IQ, is not related or is not directly proportional to your expertise in something. And I know what you're thinking at this point in time is, all right, so I understood. I basically need to practice what I want to do and I will grow, right? But another observation is, for example, me, I text every single day to, maybe it's on mail or it's a WhatsApp, whatever it is, and I'm sure each one of you texts every single day, and you've been texting regularly since the past many years. But let me just compare the last year. Do you think you text much faster today as compared to how you did 1 year ago? Or are you texting roughly at the same speed? Or people who have been driving since the last 10 years, do they drive much better than they drove 2 years ago? Or are they almost the same level of drivers? So if practice is what made us grow, then we would all be the fastest texters in the world, because we've been doing this consistently day in, day out, but we're not. And that is where Erickson's one more concept that enthralled me was the concept of purposeful practice. What does purposeful practice mean, and how is it different from practice? Practice is you and I texting every single day, but purposeful practice is practice with a purpose of growing or improving at that one particular thing. So when we're texting day in, day out, are we focused on texting as fast as possible? Are we taking feedback? We're not doing any of those things. We don't text with the purpose of becoming faster texters, and that is why after an acceptable level of learning a particular skill, a person remains there because we are not doing purposeful practice anymore. So if you want to improve at something, practice might just not be enough. You might need to invest more amount of focus in that. Make sure what is the aspect that you want to improve, where are you not working, how can you improve on those aspects, and who are the people who you can approach for feedback. And I believe this is the, as Erickson defines, the difference between practice and purposeful practice. So through these 3 experiments, we learned that there is no direct correlation between being smart and being successful. Obviously, the people who are smart have it easier, but that in no case implies that people who are not smart cannot be successful. So next time somebody asks you, are you smart enough to succeed? Just ask them, how does it matter? Thank you.